Some events exist that no matter how closely you examine them, you get stuck. This file is one of those cases. According to official records, everything begins normally. An apartment, a quiet neighborhood, a time close to midnight, and a 4-year-old child. Ethan Cross. That morning he wakes up. His mother, Olivia Cross, is in the kitchen. The house is filled with ordinary sounds. Running water, footsteps, distant traffic humming outside. Then, Ethan speaks, but not the words you expect to hear in the morning. Not "Mom," "water," "I'm hungry." No, the structure is different. The rhythm is different. The voice is strangely composed, as if it's not a child speaking, but someone who has been silent for a very long time. Olivia freezes. She doesn't even set the glass down in her hand, because what she hears sounds like a language, just not one spoken in their home. The first audio recording, made minutes later, still exists in the archives today. Raw, uncut, unfiltered, and in that recording, one thing is unmistakable. This child is not making random sounds. He is forming sentences. There is grammar, structure, intentional pauses, and even more unsettling, the number of people in the world who understand this language does not exceed the fingers on 2 hands. The recording is sent first to a pediatric specialist, then to a neurologist, then to a university department. Each report ends with the same conclusion: no imitation detected, no learned patterns, no evidence of exposure. Eventually, the label on the file changes. It no longer says language development. It says only one word: anomaly. Then the events accelerate. The child begins describing places he has never visited. He points to locations on maps. He names people. Some of those names are no longer in use today. Excavation teams are contacted. Audio recordings are reanalyzed. Independent experts are brought in. And every new report ends with the same disturbing sentence: this information lies outside the child's access range. But that is not what makes this case truly difficult. The real problem is this: Ethan Cross is not only speaking. Sometimes he is answering. There are gaps in the recordings, seconds of silence, then responses, as if he were in the middle of a conversation. At this point, science stops. Belief falls silent, and the file remains open. Because one question still has no answer. What is this child remembering? And who does that memory belong to? There is no exact time for that morning, at least not for Olivia. When she looks back later, everything feels blurred. Only certain moments remain sharp. Certain sounds. The apartment is quiet, but not completely. The low hum of the refrigerator, wind slipping through a cracked window, and breathing from the child's room. Ethan usually doesn't wake up early, and when he does, he's quiet. He might talk to his toys, but only to himself. That morning is different. When Olivia first hears the words, she doesn't understand them. They don't settle anywhere in her mind. There's a reflex when you hear a language. You don't ask, "What is this?" You just listen. And the longer you listen, the slower your body becomes. Ethan is lying in his bed, his eyes unfocused, as if he isn't looking at anything at all. The sentences are short, clear, with pauses. Children usually rush when they speak. Ethan doesn't. Olivia stands in the doorway. She doesn't enter, because she feels that something should not be interrupted. As far as she remembers later, the first clear sentence was this: "Are you listening to me?" The question is not in English, but Olivia doesn't realize that in the moment, because the question feels like a question. When Ethan finishes speaking, he goes silent. A long silence follows. Then he speaks again. The second sentence is different from the first. The tone has changed, as if he waited for an answer and received one. That's when Olivia enters the room. She says his name. Ethan turns his head, looks at her. "Mum," he says, this time in English. Normal. And that single word makes everything even stranger, because it proves that what she heard before was not a dream. That same afternoon, the first recording is made. On a phone, unplanned. Just in case, the recording lasts 2 minutes. Then it stops. Later, it is sent to 3 different specialists, independently. None of them are told the background. They are only asked one question. What is this voice? The first response comes from a child development specialist. Short, clear. This is not age-appropriate imitation. The second response comes from a linguist. Longer, but similar in tone. The phonetic structure is consistent, not random. The third response arrives with a note. This recording cannot be evaluated on its own. More data is required. More data. That night, Ethan speaks again. This time, Olivia is in the room. The child is lying in bed, his hands folded on his chest, eyes closed. The speech begins, slowly. Olivia doesn't understand the words, but she notices something else. Even with words he has never known, Ethan doesn't hesitate. He doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't correct himself. As if he already knows. When the speech ends, Ethan sits up, opens his eyes. "Mum," he says, "can you turn off the light?" That's all. The next morning they go to the doctor. A routine checkup. Reflexes normal, memory tests normal. At one point, the doctor asks, "Is a second language spoken at home?" Olivia shakes her head. No. On a tablet? Television? Any foreign content? Again, no. The doctor writes something in the file, then adds, "Let's monitor it." But the file is not something that can simply be monitored, because the recording from the third night is different from the first 2. This time, the speech is not one-sided. Ethan says something. Stops. There is a long silence. And then Ethan answers. Olivia does not stop the recording. She doesn't even move her hand. Because for the first time, a single thought crosses her mind. This child is not speaking alone. The recording from the third night will be replayed many times afterward. At first listen, nothing seems unusual, because the human ear doesn't prioritize gaps. Silence is usually ignored, but in this recording, the silence is not normal. Ethan speaks, then he stops. 1, 2, 3. Seconds pass. Then he speaks again, but the sentences are connected, as if there were no interruption at all. That's what stops Olivia. She rewinds the recording, listens again, the same thing. Ethan forms a sentence, pauses, then continues, as if he waited for the other party to finish speaking. In those gaps, there is nothing. No breathing, no rustling, no ambient noise. The room is silent. Yet Ethan's continuing sentence assumes that the silence was occupied. This is the first time Olivia transfers the recordings to a computer, not for analysis, just to store them. She creates a folder, adds the date, adds the time. 03:05 a.m. That time will repeat itself in the file again and again over the following weeks. Ethan speaks every night at the exact same time, not a minute off, like an alarm. But the alarm doesn't ring. Ethan doesn't wake up. The speech comes from inside sleep. The next day, Olivia contacts a friend who works as an audio engineer. Not an academic, not official. She simply asks, "Can you take a look?" The recording is sent. A short note is attached. Check the background noise. The response comes a few hours later. The gaps are too clean. That level of silence is difficult in a normal environment. Then another sentence. There are sections that sound cut, but they aren't. What Olivia does next matters. It's something many people wouldn't do. She decides not to show the recordings to anyone else, at least for now, because as a mother, her first instinct is to protect. But at the same time, she feels something else. This is not something that can stay inside the house. On the fourth night, the speech is shorter, but clearer. Ethan gives one-word answers. Yes. No. Not now. The words are not in English, but Olivia understands from the tone. A question was asked, an answer was given. On the fifth night, a name is spoken for the first time. Olivia doesn't understand it, but she recognizes the sound. When Ethan says the name, he pauses, just for a moment, then continues. She doesn't stop the recording, but her hand trembles, because this time, Ethan's voice seems different, slower, more deliberate. Children usually carry their words. They rush them forward. Ethan doesn't. On the sixth night, Olivia is not in the room. She's in the hallway. The door is slightly open. While speaking, Ethan sits up in his bed. His eyes are closed. As if facing someone directly, he lifts his head slightly. At one point, he lowers it. This doesn't appear in the recordings, but Olivia never forgets it. The next morning, she makes a decision. These recordings are not meant to be heard alone. They need to go somewhere official, but the right place. Not a child psychologist, not a speech therapist. Something more technical, more detached. A university. The moment Olivia presses send for the first time, she hesitates. She stares at the screen. The folder name is still there. 03_05_AM. For a moment, she considers closing it. Then she doesn't, because instinct doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it simply refuses to be silent. The file is sent, and from this point on, the case is no longer just a family matter, because a few days later, the first academic response arrives. It contains a single sentence. These recordings require frequency analysis. Standard listening is not sufficient. That sentence changes the direction of the file, and there is something Olivia doesn't know yet. When that analysis is performed, the recordings will reveal not one voice, but two distinct structures. But not yet. Not yet. Is anyone ready for that? When the file reaches the university, the first thing they do is not listen. They measure wavelengths, timelines, frequency ranges. Graphs scroll across the screen. At first glance, everything looks ordinary. A child's voice, low volume, a mostly flat line. But as the analysis deepens, something separates. The recording does not move along a single track. Between the lines, there is another layer. Extremely thin, extremely low, invisible to the human ear. But the software doesn't miss it. One member of the analysis team stops, leans closer to the screen, then leans back. This is strange, he says. The word is chosen carefully. Strange. Not anomaly. Not yet, because the academic reflex is always the same. First, look for error. The recording device is checked. Microphone sensitivity, background interference, electrical leakage, all clean. Then comes the second step, filtering. The first layer is separated. Ethan's voice is isolated. What remains is something that would normally be discarded, a frequency range considered irrelevant. But here, it is rhythmic, not random. And the most unsettling detail is this. The second structure begins when Ethan stops speaking, exactly in those gaps. The researcher adds a note. Intervals assumed to be silent are active. At this point, the file is taken from a single desk and transferred to a committee. A linguist, a neuroscientist, and one skeptic. Every team has one. At the first meeting, no one makes bold statements. Everyone is cautious. The recording is played again. The room is silent, deliberately. Ethan speaks, then stops, and on the graphs, the second layer becomes clear. It doesn't behave like a voice. It's more like a structure. No whispering, no shouting. But there is order. The neuroscientist speaks next. If this were a hallucination, he says, it would occupy the same frequency range as the child's voice. Then he adds, this does not. The skeptic interrupts, looks at his notes. Is it possible the child is producing this consciously? The answer comes quickly. No. Physiologically, it's impossible. For a 4-year-old child to control a frequency with this depth and this stability, it doesn't happen. At that point, someone says it out loud. This second layer responds to the child's voice. A brief silence fills the room, because that is not a technical statement. That means interaction. The file is still not closed, but its title changes. It no longer reads child's speech. It now reads dual-layer audio event. At this stage, Olivia is given only limited information. No details, no interpretations. Just one instruction. Continue recording. And one addition. If possible, be alone in the room. This is the first time Olivia hesitates, because being alone sometimes means hearing more. But she agrees. On the 7th night, the recording begins again. Same hour. 3:03. Ethan speaks, then stops. This time, the pause is longer. 10 seconds. 20. Then Ethan tilts his head slightly to the side. His eyes are still closed, and in a near whisper he says, "You don't want me to say this." The sentence is in English, but the tone is not a child's. Olivia holds her breath. The recording continues. Ethan goes silent again. For a while. Then he straightens his head and continues speaking in a different language. When the recording ends, the room feels empty. Olivia doesn't turn the phone off. She waits. Because for the first time, one thought becomes clear. This is no longer just a voice phenomenon. Something is setting boundaries, and boundaries are usually drawn when there are two sides. On the 8th night, Ethan doesn't speak. The time arrives. 3:05, the recording starts, but the room contains only breathing. For a while, Olivia doesn't put the phone down. She waits. Just as she's about to stop the recording, Ethan sits up in his bed. His eyes are open this time, but he still isn't looking at anything, as if there is a fixed point inside the room. "I don't have a pencil," he says. His voice is normal, English. Then silence. About 15 seconds later, he speaks again. "Okay, I'll draw it." After that sentence, he gets out of bed. His feet touch the floor, but he doesn't turn on the light. He walks to the table, opens a drawer, finds a sheet of paper. The pencil. He takes it from the correct drawer. Olivia doesn't move. She only watches. Ethan sits on the floor and begins to draw. Not fast, not uncertain. Lines follow one another. He stops, continues. Sometimes he turns the paper. Sometimes he puts the pencil down and thinks. He doesn't speak during this time. But every so often, he lifts his head and looks into empty space, as if someone is approving. About 5 minutes later, the drawing is finished. Ethan places the paper on the table, returns to his bed, lies down, pulls the blanket over himself. "Tomorrow," he says, "we need to go." For the first time, Olivia speaks. "Where?" Ethan doesn't answer. He seems asleep. In the morning, the paper is still on the table. Olivia picks it up. At first glance, it makes no sense. Lines, squares, shapes. But when she looks closely, there is order. It's not a map, but it resembles one. There are markings in the corners, an empty space in the center, and a small note written on the side, underneath. Olivia sends the image to the university, scanned, without explanation. The response arrives in the afternoon. This time, it isn't short. This drawing is not random. One more line. It is scaled. That word changes everything. Scaled means it corresponds to something real. That evening, when Ethan comes home, Olivia places the paper in front of him. "Did you draw this?" Ethan looks, nods. "What is it?" He pauses, then shrugs. "That place." "Which place?" Ethan points to the center of the drawing. "There." The answer isn't irritating. It isn't childish. It's just sufficient. That night, recording begins again. For the first time, a name is spoken while Ethan is talking. Clearly. Repeated. Olivia doesn't understand it, but she writes it down. The next day, the name is sent to the university. This time, the response is delayed. 2 days. When the email finally arrives, it's a single paragraph. This name does not appear on modern maps. However, it is found in certain maritime records from the early 19th century. An addition beneath it, the area is abandoned today. That area matches the shape in Ethan's drawing. At this point, a team is formed, not official, but organized, an archaeologist, a linguist, and one person who constantly objects. Skepticism is still alive in the file. Ethan is not questioned deliberately, because everyone has noticed the same thing. Questions begin to influence the answers. A week later, a trip is planned. Ethan is told only one thing. "We're going to look at something." "Okay," he says. He doesn't ask a single question. On the night before they leave, Ethan speaks again, but this time it isn't recorded. Olivia listens. "I can't stay here," Ethan says. "Not for long." "Why?" A pause. "Because remembering isn't good for everyone." That sentence is not a child's sentence, not an adult's either. But one thing is certain. This is not Ethan's own thought. The journey begins early in the morning. No one calls it a trip. No one uses big words. Just going. Ethan sits in the back seat, seatbelt fastened, looking out the window. He doesn't ask questions. He doesn't ask where they're going. Everyone in the team notices this. No one comments on it. Because sometimes a child's silence is more unsettling than too many questions. As the road stretches on, the landscape changes. Buildings thin out. Phone signal weakens. At a certain point, navigation stops being useful. There is a map, but no names. At one moment, Ethan leans forward. "Here," he says. The driver slows instinctively, checks the screen. There's no marker on the map. "A little further," Ethan says. Then he stops. "No. Now." The car pulls over. This is not a place where anyone would normally stop. No signs, no structures, just soil, slightly sloped, and strangely even. One of the archaeologists steps out of the car, looks around, opens his notebook. "There's no recorded work here," he says. The skeptic immediately adds, "That doesn't mean anything." Ethan opens the door. He wants to get out. Olivia hesitates, then opens it. The moment Ethan's feet touch the ground, he stops. He takes off his shoes. "This is better," he says. He looks at the soil. For a while. Then he takes 2 steps forward. 1 step back. He lightly taps the ground with his foot. "It's hollow underneath," he says. The sentence is recorded, but no one starts digging immediately. There are procedures, permits, equipment. Still, one of the archaeologists kneels down, places his hand on the ground. He doesn't say anything. He just stays there. Then he looks up. "Here," he says. The surface is different. At that point, Measurement devices come out. Ground scanning, magnetic readings. Eyes move to the screens. A line appears. Straight, continuous. This is not a natural formation. The skeptic falls silent, takes notes, doesn't speak. Ethan steps back a few paces, sits down. No one looks at him directly. But everyone is aware of him. The excavation permit is fast-tracked, not the same day, but sooner than expected. That night, Ethan doesn't speak. The recording is empty, but the next morning, he says one sentence. "It's not deep," he says. "It was covered." When excavation begins, the first layer is thinner than expected. 1 meter, a little more. Then a shovel hits something, not metal, not stone. A deeper sound. The archaeologist stops, signals with his hand. A brush is brought in. The soil is cleared slowly. A flat surface appears. Clean edges. This is not natural rock. It's a structure. Ethan stands up. He approaches, but doesn't touch. "I need to wait here," he says. No one asks why. As the excavation deepens, a lid is revealed. There is a symbol on it. Simple, but familiar. One archaeologist takes photos. Another whispers, "This symbol is old." How old is not said yet. Before the lid is opened, everything stops. Photographs, measurements. Ethan turns back, looks at Olivia. He seems about to say something, then doesn't. The lid is opened. The air inside is not cool. It's heavy, not an empty space, but not filled either. Something has waited there. The first thing visible is an object, then another. The archaeologist holds his breath. "This," he says, "doesn't belong here." Ethan doesn't speak, but he lowers his head, as if something has been completed. And this is only the first point. When the lid is fully opened, no one looks inside right away. It's an unwritten rule. You pause first. You don't disturb the space. The air coming from inside is heavy, but not dusty, as if it had been sealed for a long time, but never decayed. One of the archaeologists extends a flashlight. The light enters. A brief glint. Not metal, not stone, a softer surface. "A vessel," someone says. No, more than one. The light moves further. 2, 3, then 4, all aligned. The spacing between them is equal. That arrangement is not accidental. The skeptic raises his voice for the first time. This was placed deliberately. Ethan stands several meters away from the excavation area, hands in his pockets. He isn't looking. Olivia steps closer to him. She wants to ask something, then decides not to, because Ethan's posture is that of someone waiting. One of the vessels is carefully removed. It's coated with a thin layer. It doesn't open. It shouldn't. Photographs are taken. Numbers assigned. While the first vessel is examined, something else becomes visible. Behind the vessels, a narrow groove embedded in the ground. A line. At first glance, insignificant. But when measured, it's straight. Perfectly straight. This is craftsmanship. An archaeologist kneels, runs his finger along the line, stops at a certain point. "There's something here," he says. The excavation doesn't deepen. Instead, it slows down. The soil is removed millimeter by millimeter. And then, a roll emerges, wrapped in cloth. But the cloth isn't new. It's very old, and unexpectedly, intact. Everyone notices the same thing. This wasn't hidden in a hurry. This was deliberately preserved. The roll is not opened. Not yet. Ethan lifts his head. For the first time, he looks at the excavation. "This," he says, "is the first." Olivia turns to him. "The first what?" Ethan doesn't answer. He lowers his gaze again. The excavation site is closed, temporarily. The objects are placed in secure containers. Reports are filed. No one makes grand statements. Because at this stage, everyone is cautious. That evening, the team gathers in a quiet room. Photographs are projected on a screen. Measurements are shared. The linguist speaks. The markings on these vessels do not match any modern symbol system. An archaeologist adds, "But they feel familiar." The skeptic cuts in. Familiar doesn't mean known. Ethan is not in that meeting, deliberately, because everyone has noticed the same thing. His presence changes the balance. That night, Ethan speaks. The recording runs. But this time, it's short, a single sentence. This should not be touched. It's unclear who he's speaking to. The next day, the roll is sent to a laboratory, to be opened. But before that happens, there is something everyone understands. Materials like this either turn out to be empty, or far more full than expected. One member of the team says, "If this really is ancient," he doesn't finish the sentence, because everyone is thinking the same thing. When the roll reaches the laboratory, the first thing they do is not open it. No one rushes. Some move deliberately slow, because materials like this can be destroyed by a single wrong motion. The room is kept cold, humidity stable, light low. The roll is placed on the table. 4 people stand around it. No one speaks. For a moment. Then someone adjusts their gloves. Another turns on the camera. Recording begins. The first layer of cloth is carefully unwrapped. The second layer, thicker. This isn't packaging. This is protection. When the roll finally emerges, everyone notices the same thing. There is writing, but not what anyone expected. The ink is faded, but not smeared. The lines are clear, the characters deliberate. The linguist leans forward, studies it in silence, then leans back. "This," he says, "is not a modern imitation." The sentence hangs in the room, because no one is saying what it is yet, only what it is not. The language of the text doesn't fit a familiar form. It isn't a known dialect, but it isn't entirely foreign either. There are recognizable fragments, but the way they connect is unexpected. The linguist takes notes, circles one word, then another. "These," he says, "are not from the same period." No one objects, because as illogical as it sounds, the text supports it. Within the same line, there are structural traces from different centuries. That doesn't happen, or rather, it isn't supposed to. Another silence settles over the lab. Then someone asks, "This text, who does it belong to?" There is no answer, because answering now would be speculation. The team begins decoding the text piece by piece, not word by word, structure by structure. They study where sentences end, the pauses, the gaps. And here, something unexpected appears. There are gaps in the text, but not randomly, as if they were left for someone to read. Those gaps align in timing with the pauses in Ethan's audio recordings. When this is noticed, no one says it out loud, but everyone is looking at the same line. One team member whispers, "This is not a monologue." That matters, because a monologue moves in one direction. But this text feels like it's waiting for a response. At the same time, Ethan is at home. He doesn't speak that day, but he draws. Not like before. No squares, no lines, just empty spaces. A large blank area in the center of the page, small markings around it. Olivia watches. She doesn't ask, "What is this?" She doesn't ask anymore. She just observes. Ethan puts the pencil down. "They'll read it," he says, "from the wrong place." For the first time, Olivia hesitates at a sentence. "Who?" Ethan shrugs. "They." That night, a recording is made. But this time, the voice is very low. Ethan whispers. A sentence breaks off halfway. Then silence. Then a single word. Stop. For the first time, The word leaves Ethan's mouth as a warning. The next day, a message arrives from the laboratory. Short. We are continuing to decode the text. However, progress is slower than expected. One sentence added below. Some sections seem unwilling to be read. That phrase isn't scientific, but it's written, and it's added to the file, because at this point, this file no longer contains only evidence. It also contains hesitation. As progress in the laboratory slows, other things in the file begin to accelerate. One member of the team reopens Ethan's audio recordings in parallel with the text analysis, this time from beginning to end. By date, a table is created. Times, pauses, gaps. Then those gaps are placed side by side with the gaps in the text. The first overlap looks like coincidence. The second is unsettling. By the third, no one says coincidence anymore. Certain gaps in the text align perfectly. To the second, with the silences in Ethan's recordings. This is not something anyone expected, but it's not something that can be ignored. The neuroscientist takes notes, says nothing. The skeptic stands up quietly, paces the room. If this is a pattern, he says finally, then there are two possibilities. No one asks what they are. They wait. Either someone knew everything, he says, or someone still knows. That sentence doesn't make it into the report, but everyone remembers it. That same day, a brief meeting is held with Ethan. Not official, no cameras, just a table. Ethan on one chair, two adults across from him. No leading questions are asked. This is done deliberately. Would you like to explain the empty spaces you drew? One of them asks. Ethan looks at the paper, points to the large empty space in the center. That place, he says. Which place? A pause. The place where they stop reading. The answer doesn't quite match the question, but it's written down. Who stops? They ask. Ethan lifts his head, looks at them. It's not always the same people. That sentence is neither explanatory nor evasive, but the atmosphere in the room changes. The meeting is kept short. Ethan is tired. That much is clear. That same evening, a new report arrives from the laboratory. In one section of the text, there is no direct date, no name, but there is a structure, a kind of marking. When read, it feels as though it is addressing someone. But who is unclear. The linguist adds a note to the report. This section does not describe, it calls out. That is not a scientific phrase, but it's written. The team decides not to read the entire text aloud. There is no formal vote. No one asks why. It simply isn't read. That night, Ethan speaks. The recording runs, but this time the words are unclear. There are pauses between them, as if he is listening. Then he says, "This wasn't supposed to happen." That sentence carries for the first time a sense of regret. But whose regret it is unknown. Olivia stands in the doorway. She doesn't enter, because she knows now, some moments should not be interrupted. The next day, someone on the team opens a new heading in the file, temporal overlaps. Under it, a single sentence is written. The events are not progressing along the same line. That heading changes the direction of the case, because now the question is no longer, how does this child know? It shifts to something far more unsettling. When does this knowledge belong to? And that question, after the heading, temporal overlaps, is added to the file. No one behaves the same way again. Everyone now feels as if they're watching the same event from different moments in time. Reports increase. Clarity does not. Some specialists suggest that certain sections of the text refer to events that have not yet occurred. They don't write this directly. They use indirect language. temporal inconsistency, order of events conflict, narrative displacement. These words are safe, but without looking at each other, everyone knows that's not what they really mean. Ethan, meanwhile, is different. Not quieter, but shorter. He doesn't give long answers anymore. Sometimes he gives none at all. One day, he looks at Olivia and says, "They opened it too early." Olivia doesn't know what to ask. She just waits. "Who?" she says. Ethan shrugs. "Time." The word sounds strange coming from a child, but the fact that it's strange no longer surprises anyone. That night, a recording is made. The hour is the same. 3:03. Ethan doesn't speak, but his breathing changes. It's clear on the recording. The intervals between breaths are irregular, as if he's trying to match someone else's rhythm. Then a single sentence appears. "Not yet." Who it's directed at is unclear. The next morning, something is noticed in the laboratory. A section of the text is not the same as in the first photographs. It hasn't changed, but it's clearer. The ink appears darker, some lines more defined. This isn't normal. The photographs are compared, same lighting, same angle, yet the readability has increased. Someone asks, could the material be reacting? But reacting to what? Heat? Humidity? There's no answer. That day, Ethan is not brought to the lab, but the time gap between the texts change, and something Ethan said is noted. Hours, minutes. Some things line up. This is no longer just a matter of linguistics or archaeology. Another neurologist is added to the file, and someone who studies human perception of time. During the meeting, someone says out loud, "If this child isn't remembering the information," they stop, then continue. But accessing it, then the question becomes, no one breathes. What are we actually looking at? That question is entered into the record, because at this point, questions are more valuable than answers. That evening, Ethan speaks, but this time it's different, as if he's weighing the words. "You misunderstood," he says. "I don't know." A long pause. "I'm there." With that sentence, the recording cuts off, because Olivia, without realizing it, turns off the phone. She notices later that her hands are sweating. She doesn't sleep that night. But Ethan does. Deep. Silent. When morning comes, there's a new sheet of paper on the drawing table. Ethan's handwriting. This time, no map, no shapes, just a single line. And at each end of the line, 2 words. Now, then. The space between them is empty. Olivia picks up the paper, looks at it. And for the first time, she does not want that empty space to be filled. That empty space is not filled by anyone. In the laboratory, the paper is placed on the table, projected onto screens, but no commentary follows, because at this point, to interpret would be to take a side. One member of the team breaks the silence. "This isn't a timeline," he says. "It's a threshold." That word is entered into the record. Threshold. Not a beginning, not an end. A passage. From that day on, certain things change. Ethan stops drawing. The recordings become shorter. Sometimes there is no speech at all. But on the nights when he doesn't speak, the sensors become more active. There is no sound. But there are waves. The technical team notices it. In the recordings, during moments without sound, micro-vibrations appear. They are not audio, but they are not silence either. A technician writes in the report, "This is a pattern without a signal." The sentence fits no academic guideline, but it isn't removed, because no one can replace it with a more accurate one. One day, Ethan stops in a laboratory corridor, in front of a door. Inside is the text, the roll, sealed. Ethan doesn't look inside, He just stands there. Then he turns to Olivia. "They shouldn't go in there," he says. "Not yet." "When?" Olivia asks. Ethan doesn't answer. He just looks at the door. That day, the team makes a decision. Decoding the text is suspended. The official reason, preservation. But everyone knows this is a decision to wait. To wait for what? That night, recording continues. But Ethan doesn't speak. There is a long silence, then a very low sound. This is not Ethan's voice. The frequencies don't match, but the word is clear. Approaching. The word stands alone in the recording. No lead-in, no aftermath. The next day, someone adds a note to the file. From this point forward, we may be the ones triggering the events. That sentence changes everything, because science usually observes. But here, the line between observing and influencing is becoming blurred. That evening, Ethan looks at Olivia. For a long time. "Can we stop it?" Olivia asks. Ethan shakes his head. "No." "Can we slow it down?" A pause. "Maybe." That maybe becomes the heaviest word in the file, because it isn't certain. But it isn't hopeless either. Close to midnight, as the hour approaches. 3:03. Ethan is sitting in his bed, awake. The recording is running. He takes a deep breath, then whispers. Crossing the threshold doesn't always mean moving forward. That sentence doesn't match the text exactly, but it looks in the same direction. And at this point, everyone realizes one thing. This story has not reached a destination yet. It has only arrived somewhere. Waiting is not as silent as they expected. Even though the decoding of the text has been suspended, the file continues to operate on its own. No new reports, no new excavation, but the old recordings are listened to again. This time, in reverse, from end to beginning. A sound technician suggests playing the recordings backward along the timeline. No one asks why. They just try it. And something strange happens. Some of the gaps contain faint sound traces that went unnoticed on first listen. But these traces don't make sense going forward. They make sense going backward. A word is explained by the sentence that comes after it. This is not normal. When the linguist realizes this, he puts his pen down. "This isn't narration," he says. "This is recall." That word appears in the file for the first time. Recall, as if something already happened and is now being remembered again. But by whom? Meanwhile, Ethan grows even quieter, but he isn't absent. One evening, he approaches Olivia. He's holding a small piece of paper. This paper doesn't resemble the others. No map, no empty space, just a single symbol, a circle, filled black at the center. "What is this?" Olivia asks. Ethan doesn't answer immediately. He looks at the paper, then says only this: "You don't go back there." For the first time, the sentence sounds like a warning. But to whom? That same day, in the laboratory, a structure is identified in the text that carries the meaning of return. Not linguistically, semantically. The sentence doesn't address the future, it calls back to the past. This makes no sense for the period the text is assumed to belong to. But the text does not behave like it belongs to that period. During the meeting, someone says, "This text may not have been written." The room turns toward them. "What do you mean?" someone asks. "Maybe," they say, "it was left." The sentence isn't debated, because no one knows how to debate it. That night, Ethan says something with absolute clarity for the first time. The recording is running. The sound is clean. "I didn't start this." A long pause. What came after? That sentence fractures the file, because until now, everyone had kept Ethan at the center. But maybe the center was somewhere else. just before dawn, a few minutes before 3:03, with the recording running, a very low vibration is detected. No sound, but the wave is distinct. The technical team could label it as noise. They don't, because the same vibration appears on previous nights, but this time it lasts longer. At that moment, Ethan wakes up. He doesn't speak right away. He just sits there. Then he says one sentence. Going back is sometimes more dangerous than remembering. That sentence does not appear anywhere in the text, but it looks in the same direction the text does. And at this point, everyone involved in the file feels the same thing. This case is not moving forward. It is circling itself. The file is not closed. This is a deliberate decision. There is no committee ruling, no official justification, just a single word written at the top of the file. Open. The text remains in the laboratory. Controlled, untouched. The excavation site is not sealed, but it isn't active either, on standby. The recording devices are still running, but not every night, because by now, everyone understands one thing. Recording is not always a passive act. As the days pass, Ethan appears more normal. He goes to school. He plays. When asked questions, he gives short answers. But there are moments when he drifts, stares at a single point, then turns away. Olivia no longer asks questions in those moments. She just writes them down. One day, Ethan leaves his notebook on the table. Between the pages is a small drawing. This time it isn't a map, not an empty space. It's a door, closed, but without a lock. Beneath it, a single word is written. Later. One member of the laboratory team adds a sentence to the final report. In this case, cause and effect do not move in a single direction. The sentence isn't academically sufficient, but it's honest, because everyone now knows this event belongs neither entirely to the past, nor only to the present. One evening at the dinner table, Ethan looks at Olivia. "Is it over?" he asks. Olivia pauses, then shakes her head. "I don't know," she says. That answer is enough for Ethan, because he doesn't seem like someone who doesn't know either. The final recording is made weeks after everything else. The hour is the same, 3:03. This time, Ethan doesn't speak. There is only breathing. And at the very end of the recording, a brief moment, a gap. Then the device shuts off, on its own. The incident is reported as a technical malfunction, but the final note added to the file is not official. It's handwritten, in the margin. Some stories are not meant to be told, but remembered. The file is still in the archive, accessible, but restricted. And at this point, the responsibility shifts to the observer, because one question remains unanswered. If Ethan is not truly remembering something, but merely accessing it, then if the issue is not the child, what is the issue? The file remains here, open, and perhaps exactly where it needs to be.